Oh, and then the one other thing you'll see is the viewer numbers or whatever are up near the live button, right? So we have like whatever two. We have all of solid 2 viewers, 6 viewers. Okay, yeah. Anyways, so
Wait, how do you see that? I don't see that. I don't
oh,
think
you
I see
don't see
that.
that?
No,
Okay.
it's
No,
I don't see that.
Well, I guess I have special powers.
we can only see timer.
It's
You're
always going to
special.
be we're going to maintain single digit viewership here.
Okay,
We can't
then
have
it's
these
fine.
opinions being spread to the masses. Yeah, so I'm Dan. I work on a number of different projects: Native Wind UI, Create Expo Stack, and soon Plugin Pro. Jacek, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, my name is Jacek, and I'm the creator of React Native Uni styles. And yeah, I guess that's the pretty good summary. Mark?
Yeah, I'm Mark. I build stuff. I don't know. I do a lot in React Native. I build a lot of React Native libraries, and we're here to talk shit.
Yes, yes. I don't know exactly what Mark has built, but he claims that he's built things.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're mostly.
maybe it's someone else building for me, and I just take credit all the
Yeah,
time.
that's what it
Yeah,
is. I bet I've seen all the other people, and then you jump in and you like take
yeah,
credit for it. Okay,
right. Yeah, that's
I
it.
know that game. Um,
Mm,
so we're here to talk about just some stuff that's like been changing in the mobile development space. We primarily all do React Native stuff, but like backgrounds in iOS and more like native, like Swift, Objective C type stuff. um, there have been some changes this year and last year that I think are worth noting, as far as where people are coming from, what they're expecting. And I thought you guys would be a really good group of folks to chat about that. And I aim for this to be kind of like more of a series, and we'll bring other people in to discuss it. But
you're starting a podcast without starting a podcast.
dude, podcasts are so like 2015 or something. I can't do more boomer things. All right, I'm gonna be like
Yeah,
the Hawk
that's true.
Tuah girl over here.
Yeah,
Um,
I have one question then. Do you have like 20 different tracksuits, or is it the same one that you're always wearing?
I actually have multiple tracksuits, and
They're
I'm
just
I'm
same way, so it
acquiring
doesn't.
so for every conference. If anyone who's organizing a conference, when you accept me to the conference to talk, I buy a new tracksuit. I will show up
Mhm.
to your conference in a new tracksuit, and that is how the collection expands. And
But it's
I
always the same color, right? You're never picking different colors.
no, if you remember React Native London, I was wearing a blue tracksuit.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Is
See, and
blue
I
the color
think
of UK? Is that why it's
uh,
blue, or is it just random
no,
blue?
I really wanted a blue tracksuit because the shoes are fire. I don't know if
Mm.
you remember the shoes, but they have the like blue stripes on them and stuff. Um, but whatever, it's fine. It's okay. I'll make the next one memorable. I was gonna show up to the Paris conference in like a full like U.S. Olympic tracksuit from like the '80s, but I think that they got the sense and they were like, you know what? Maybe he'll
Just get
speak
this the
next year.
Squid Game one, like the green.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that. I
It's
saw that. I also like how I'm influencing you and Mike now too, because at London, you guys were all wearing the tracksuits and stuff, and the Margello photo was. Anyways, we're here to talk about the future of mobile development. Yeah, one of the things I was seeing is there's a lot of folks coming in from web now, like crazy more than before, and there's I feel like over the last several years we had, Mark, you run it. We all run an agency actually, and you have clients who come to you sort of with differing needs, and you'd often have people who are like preferring one thing or the other, performance or like cross-platform or what have you. Uh, you never really had as much of the like we want everything or we expect everything, but I feel that that's increasingly becoming the case. Um, and simultaneously, you have all these people coming in from web thinking like, oh, this looks like React. I'm going to use this like React. and they're coming to some like very painful realizations. All while still you have folks who are trying to figure out what's the opinionated way to present all of this such that it works for web and mobile. And that's a whole topic unto itself, is like, how do you build with any set of tools such that it targets like these different platforms in a meaningful way that doesn't create a burden. I'm kind of curious from your guys' like agency's perspective, like, have you seen a shift at all in like what people are asking for over the last like 3 years?
Yeah. So I guess I will start. As you mentioned, the biggest issue from my side, I guess, is the web support. If you choose to use React Native, you will get Android, iOS, plus tablets. Of course, you can target also Vision OS if you want to, but still, clients expect to get web version, and we can actually sell a lot of projects because of that we can use one code base. But to be honest, React Native Web was good 2 years ago. Actually, that's the main reason why I tried to implement a lot of cool features in Unistyles 3.0, because we had a lot of problems with one of our projects because of the CSS, because of the platform differences. So I guess clients expect perfect web plus mobile, and this perfect is hard to achieve with the current version or current state of React Native Web. Yeah, so maybe I will pass voice to Mark because I don't want to say too much about it yet.
Hi, Lauritz.
I love, Lauritz and Renan are just going off right now.
It's just this random old ass library that I built like 3 or 4 years ago, and it's like I don't think I've updated it ever since. I'm not even sure if it builds on the latest React Native, but yeah, thank you. This one uses a private API, by the way, Lauritz. So I'm not sure if it goes through app review. I think it did for Shadowlands though. I use it for Shadowlands. Anyways, a shift in what customers need. I don't know, to be honest. I don't think I've noticed a significant change in that. We build mostly apps, and I don't want to build websites, so I pass on all website contracts to different agencies because we want to focus on what we do best and what we love doing, which is mobile development. So that's iOS and Android. And we don't have any requests for Vision OS either. So there's no like real, at least we don't see a real market in it yet. So we mostly only work on iOS and Android. We specialize in that. We build, we do performance stuff and everything, and I don't think anything of that will ever change. There's always the possibility to write slow code. And yeah, I think it's like SwiftUI definitely had an impact. A lot of people are building stuff with SwiftUI now. There's good SwiftUI apps. But apart from the technology, it's the same.
Yeah, we'll have situations where we just think that a client is better served by SwiftUI, and so we'll actually end up rewriting everything from React. We end up just using React Native for the Android version. And SwiftUI is plenty good. You don't have full coverage there for everything we want to do, but like for the stuff you do, like it works really well, and you can just like pretty easily adjust for everything that's missing. We still take the web stuff here and there, but like we don't get too involved. Usually it just becomes this extension of like a client that came through for mobile. More so I'm noticing the web stuff, the requests for that coming through from the dev tool side of things. So like the projects that we build, like Native Win UI and stuff, and people just sort of like expect that stuff out of the gate. And supporting it is kind of challenging, not necessarily because any specific implementation is particularly challenging, but just like coming to the conclusion of which opinionated approach to take and whether that aligns with the ecosystem as it's moving forward is like particularly difficult. So I respect pretty much anyone who takes an opinionated stance and just like runs with it and is like, yeah, this is what we're doing, because it's still pretty early, and I feel like this is very much an evolving space. One other thing that I notice is the difficulty with which like React Native struggles to create like that native feel in an application. I think a lot of that comes down to what you were saying, like Mark, with performance. You do like, I mean, I've been working with y'all for a bit here now, and it's like the level of talent at Margello is like wild, right? And you kind of do need that level of talent to achieve that level of performance within React Native, especially. And then you have all the little like subtle things that folks like Laritz will focus on that keep the experience feeling native to any individual platform. And for the entire length of React Native so far, it has felt like a slog. Like it's really sucked to do, and it's only just starting to get like even remotely straightforward. Like with Native Wind, we're going to be adding the inline styles from like Reanimated 4 to do the animations and stuff. And I don't even know of another way to do it that actually feels straightforward, that you don't have to like learn this entire like stuff that just comes out of the box with Swift UI, you know?
Yeah.
So
That's true.
I was hoping we could chat like very briefly about kind of what we find that React Native itself does really well versus what it does not so great. And I kind of want to let Marc start on that one because I know he's got like hours of content probably to talk about it. But if you were to try to high level it.
Just real quick, can you guys still hear me great? Because I just changed my mic.
Yeah.
Great would be an overstatement. We can hear you. It's a little bit quiet.
Okay, hold
From
on.
the cave.
Yeah.
Okay, is it better now?
You're whispering to us from somewhere far off in a distant land.
From the Vienna.
Okay, I don't know. Is it? I don't know. I have this mic.
Marc,
Hold on.
I'll
better.
donate.
It's fine.
I'll donate a mic.
Okay, is it better now?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, my bad. Yeah, I do have a lot of opinions on that actually, but I don't think I can. Like, I didn't write them down before.
Yeah.
So I'm just speaking off the top of my head right now. I think React itself, at least at the state of React 18, is a very nice framework. With React 19, it's moving more towards like server-driven development, which I personally don't. I wouldn't say don't like, but it's like it's more targeted towards web developers and apps that are like strongly relying on servers and databases, like apps that are simply just viewers for databases. Like I don't know, a Walmart app that's just showing the latest things that are in stock. That's a use case for that, but I don't. So if I would pick a project to work on, it definitely wouldn't be something like that. So obviously I like more like I like to build more native apps, like a camera app or whatever, like something that's really bare to like close to the metal. And React 18 is really good at that. And I mean, it's not getting worse, right? It's just React is adding features for like the web instead of for native, in my opinion. But so I like React. React is a good part of React Native. I like writing in React. I like JSX components. I like the state, use memo, and even use effect. If you use it correctly, it's not necessarily a bad thing. People just don't know how to use it. Yeah, I mean, you can. It's fairly easy to use it right, in my opinion. It's also easy to use it wrong, but you just need to understand it first. Rewrite the hook from scratch just so you understand how it works, and then you can't really misuse it anymore, in my opinion. But if you don't understand how it works and just read the docs and you say, okay, first parameter is a function, second parameter is an array, what can I do wrong? Okay, then you're just going to use it wrong. But it's the same with pretty much every technology, I guess. Okay, I want to rephrase my point a bit here. Use effect can be used wrong more easily than other APIs.
It's straightforward to use it incorrectly. It's like there's a
Yeah.
pattern that I remember reading it one like old ass dev article. Like this is some boomer shit right here. You want to build your stuff such that it's easy. It's like straightforward to do the right thing, and it's not impossible but hard to do the wrong thing. And I think use effect is a great example of the exact inverse of that rule.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I think about it.
That's fair. But you know, my expectation is that you read how the hook works, and then you understand it, and then you can use it correctly, and then you don't talk about using, you know, about it being a bad hook ever again because you use it correctly. And you know, just giving too much energy towards the opinion it is a bad hook, it's just, you know, like it's not, it's counterproductive. Anyways, so React is a good thing. I like React. I also like, that's one thing I specifically like, I like Reanimated's APIs. I think it's very easy to build animations in React Native. And at least with Reanimated, you know, 2 and 3. But yeah. What else do I like about React Native? I do like the fact that you write JavaScript and it, you know, you just refresh and it just works, which is something we don't see in other frameworks at all. Like maybe I think Flutter has it as well, but like SwiftUI, you only have your preview mode. You don't have live, you know, hot module reloading, which is something that I really, really like. It's good for productivity. You can just build stuff much faster. And then for stuff I don't like about React, I think this list can be quite long, to be honest. I don't like the fact that that's not something necessarily bad about React Native, but it's just the fact that a framework that's open source and been around for, I think, 10 years now, the code quality is just, it's a huge code base, and it, you know, you start to pile up some technical debt, which is almost unavoidable. Like even Linux core has technical debt. It's just how it is, right? If you build something, it needs to be backwards compatible. You can't really scrap shit out, and you can just you know, remove code that breaks backwards compatibility just for the sake of it being a better code base. That's just not how it works. But yeah, that's one thing I don't really like about it, because I work a lot on, you know, on like framework development. I build a lot of libraries. I interact a lot with the React Native internals. From time to time, I also do React Native core PRs. And it's just
gnarly one. The what was it, 10-12%? Was it? I don't remember.
Yeah, 12% for this one project we measured it in. It was a performance improvement for Android. That's actually an interesting one. I think I want to talk about that. That's without leaking who we built it for. It was a pretty big client. So one of the devs of their team, of their development team, they said, you know, look into the bundle memory mapping feature. He was under the suspicion that something wasn't going, you know, properly there, which is already a good suspicion, right? It's a very complex topic. And then I was in SF at the time, and I met with Cvetan from the Hermes team. Really, really smart guy. I talked to him about memory mapping the bundle. So memory mapping, for those who don't know what that is if you have a file on storage, so a resource or any other file, and you want to load this file, but you don't necessarily want to load the entire thing at once, which is what you would do if you want to display an image, for example. You load the entire thing at once. But if you want to load, for example, JavaScript code, like your bundle, your React Native bundle, you don't need to load the entire thing at once, because you're going to use all the functions at the end, you know, not right now, but, you know, later on when you navigate to a different screen. So what you can do there, that's a Unix feature. It's called mmap, memory map. That's also the same technology React Native MMKV uses, by the way, where you just memory map a section of storage, so in this case a file, to a section of memory. So it's basically virtual memory then that you can read from. In this case, it's read-only. It can also be read-write, but in this case, it's read-only. And the problem is, or the assumption was, Hermes assumes that you memory map the bundle, so you can, you know, start reading immediately without loading the rest, like 90%. And the bundle can be large; it's multiple megabytes, so loading it takes some time. Okay, enough backstory. That was the assumption. And apparently, React Native also implemented that memory mapping for the bundle on iOS and on Android. So they were smart. It works. The problem is in the React Native app, they do something that in open source we don't do, which is they decompress the bundle, save it to file, and then this will be memory mapped in the future. But in open source, every other app stores the bundle as a compressed file. And if it's compressed, you can't directly memory map it because you would have to uncompress or decompress it first, so you can actually read it, right? It's like it's zipped. And Android does this by default for all resources that you embed into an Android app. So, and Yannick found this out from my team. He's also a really, really smart guy. And he found out that on Android, the bundle was basically compressed. That's why memory mapping didn't work and just failed silently. So it didn't fail. It just went a different, slower path where it just decompressed the file and loaded the entire thing in its full entirety. So we fixed that by ignoring the bundle from the compression list, and now it was stored uncompressed in the resulting APK file, and it could be memory mapped now, which resulted in a 12% or I think 400 millisecond startup time improvement on one specific Android app. That is a
wild chain to follow. How long of a process? Like, you're talking about meeting with these people, like chatting with these people, right?
Yeah, I was at the Facebook office, but it was just for something different. I just wanted to meet these guys, but it was a good coincidence that we just talked about this as well. So the guy from the client, I think mentioned it just one day before or something. Then we started talking about it on the Discord. Then Shimon asked me to just ask the Hermes team if the bundle is memory mapped or whatever. And then it was just a chain of like conversations back and forth, and I think it took Yannick probably like less than a day to figure it out. So he's like, when you give him a computer, he can solve everything. He's like he's a wizard.
So yeah. I think I just want to point out, Jacek, I also want to get your take on this all, but I wanted to point out the number one piece of advice that actually one of the people that I work with, Dan Scanlon, who's in the chat as well. He is like the shining bastion of this idea that first principles to everything. Like you the second you have any problem or the second you want to like diagnose something, don't jump in head first into like trying to just like make sense of a whole bunch of moving parts. What is the upstream blocker? Like, what is the thing that's actually blocking you?
Wait, is that your Dan from your team?
Yeah.
Oh, Dan, I heard very, very good things about you.
Yeah, we'll get that. He's also pretty cracked at Call of Duty, unlike you. So when we start doing the Call of Duty streams,
I was better than you in Call of Duty.
Who's to say, really?
The scoreboard.
We'll see. Well, I don't think that there's any public scoreboard to suggest any of this.
I think there literally is. There's like public stats with KD and everything. So maybe I wouldn't go that way, but okay.
We'll see. We'll see. But so Dan is always advocating for me to think of the upstream blocker, and when you do that and you can maintain it for quite some time, that's actually the thing that I see the most talented people end up doing, almost like across the board. They're literally just looking for the blocker. I remember even like I noticed like this is how like Dan Abramov like I have seen go about a problem. He has absolutely no shame in like having you explain things multiple times to him, and that's just to identify that upstream block. And when you actually take that approach, it ends up paying huge dividends like this Android thing, But anywho, Jacek, I was curious about also, have I just been mispronouncing your name? Is it Jacek?
It's Jacek, yeah.
My God. All right. Well, Jacek then.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna start pronouncing it correctly this time, along with Shimon.
Simon.
Eventually you guys will become a state of the United States and this won't be a problem, but for now,
yeah,
it is an issue. the pros cons of like React Native for what you have seen. What's that been like for you over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I do remember how it was back in 2017 when we tried to build the first application for client. It was simple app to scan the QR code. And even though it was a simple concept, it was crashing a lot because of the old React Native camera. So we went from hundreds of crashes or dozens of crashes to today. Actually, I like React Native. I see a lot of benefits of Swift UI, of Jetpack Compose. But still, we can move to the other side, to the native side, and be happy about it. Yet, React Native gives us a lot of benefits. So I think it will stay for the next decade, at least. I don't see it will like be replaced by Flutter or any other framework. Yeah, because
I don't think that's gonna happen.
yeah, I tried Flutter. I don't have any problem to Flutter, but it was like 10 years. So I can judge by time, and it looks good. It looks solid. Like Mark said, yeah, we are going to server-side rendering. We are going to web. That's why I actually don't like the web state in the React Native. Of course, I'm super grateful for the React Native web. We can build cross-platform apps. We can be cross-platforms as soon as we hit the first view and use a style sheet or native wind or Unistyles, whatever you want. But on the other hand, so Mark doesn't like to build like web apps. He loves to focus on mobile. But we have a lot of clients that wants to build everything. And I'm not saying that we will build like a landing page with Tailwind, with cool animations, but actually a lot of enterprise clients expect to get same app scaled to web. So it doesn't necessarily needs to be like super cool with animations and so on. So we hit a lot of issues with the React Native web. For example, I can give one example that I spotted like few days ago. So if you build simple form in React Native, you have plenty of frameworks libraries for the native part. For the web, you will simply output inputs or select or checkbox and so on. So it's impossible to map correctly the tab index. So the focus index when you press tab on your keyboard with React Native Web, because we can either use the 0 or -1 as two values. We can actually map 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. We also hit a lot of issues when we try to build React cross-platform table. So we use for web, for example, Tanstack table. For the mobile, we use custom solution. So we hit a lot of issues while trying to build cross-platform components. So for me, go on.
Yeah, we just run into that with native Wind UI as well, and we're actually having to rewrite like RN primitives for that reason. I just I think I resonate a little bit more with Mark here. We're like, especially with the work on native Wind, you see people coming in with like I was saying earlier, the expectation that like, oh, I come from React Native looks like React. I expect the patterns that I'm familiar with to work here. And that's a very dangerous idea, because if you give the people what they want there, it kind of creates a bad experience for everybody, and it can be interpreted like very differently by a number of different people.
I think all I'm saying, like my point here is, if you try to make an app that works on iOS, Android, and web using the same code base, you're making a compromise. And the compromise between iOS and Android is not as big as the compromise between iOS or Android and web, because the web is just fundamentally very, very different from mobile. because you also have to support like all those responsive layouts. And I talked with Lauritz like countless hours about this actually when we were in San Francisco. And we're all on the same page here. The web is just very different from mobile, and I don't think you should have the same code base. But then again, there's a compromise for a reason. If you are some enterprise customer, if you're building a large app that tries to look the same, it doesn't have a ton of complex features, you're not using camera to do real-time streaming and I don't know 3D model rendering or whatever, you're just rendering some components, then you can do it. But you're obviously not going to build like a mind-blowing, visually stunning app for any of those platforms, which is a fair compromise. And then also, if you want to build a visually stunning app, I think it's with the current state of React Native, the best case scenario would be, the best case scenario in my opinion is native app for iOS, native app for Android, and native app for web. So that's React or whatever framework you want to use. I'm not a web guy, I don't know. And then the second best scenario is React Native for mobile, which is already very advanced, and React for web. Because you can still share a bunch of code. You can share the whole thing. It's a different build setup. It's a different, UI rendering code. But you can share a lot of like React hooks. You can share maybe even the database. If it's a similar API, you can share your state layer. You can share all of your API calls. But the view layer is different, which is a good thing. You're using a different gesture detector. You're using different animations on web. You're using like those CSS animations, which are faster than updating JS values. And then on native, you use reanimated for animations, which is faster than using React Native's animated API. So I think it's good.
Specific stuff,
right?
As it,
right.
Yeah.
Right, but the platform on mobile can be. The common denominator is that you have iOS and Android on under one umbrella, basically, which is the second best scenario in my opinion. It's close to native apps, especially with all the cool libraries that are available for React Native and individual people maintaining them and making sure it's like the best state of the art technology. And I think that works very well. But a native SwiftUI app is. If you only want to build for iOS, I think SwiftUI might be the better option. It's going to, it's increasing in adoption a lot. It has matured quite a lot. It's not fully there yet. It's also, from what I know, it's not. So when SwiftUI was released, it was not as good or feature complete as when UIKit was released back in the day. So it is a bit behind, but that's fair, I think. I think they're working a lot on it. They're building a lot of apps in SwiftUI, a lot of Apple apps. And it's going to be a future the same way that Swift is the future instead of Objective-C. And, it will always be around Objective-C and UIKit, but SwiftUI is the future. And that's also where I think one more interesting point can come in. I think SwiftUI would have more adoption if you would write SwiftUI with JavaScript and not Swift, because more people know JavaScript and more people want to write JavaScript. Even though it's slower and even though it can do less than Swift can. But that's an interesting case for a framework.
Actually. Yeah, I was gonna, before we jump into this sort of point, and it'll close out the discussion because we only have a couple minutes left. We can pick it up again at some point. But
we also have a question from Lauritz, by the way.
I know. I want to get to that too. But I just, as a transition here in general, something that I'm noticing is that while those beginners are coming in and they're really hyped on the cross-platform stuff and like one code base, like one set of tools everywhere, especially if they already know the React stuff, they want to apply it to mobile and build apps that way. Advanced mobile developers increasingly I'm seeing are wanting that like bridge into like the native stuff. Like they want an easier interface to platform specific code, specifically following the pattern you were just outlining, Marc, right? So it's like we know based off of our time spent in JavaScript land and Swift land and Kotlin land and web, these things aren't going away. There isn't like a new model of development where all of this stuff is united under one roof. Those things are going to remain the way they are because many people need them. Many people need them to achieve the end result that they're looking for. And so when you get into the nitty gritty of it, how easy that is to do, and how much the framework does the work for you, which I think is sort of where you were going to accomplish that. That is a separate thing entirely. And I think as we move forward here into the future, we can expect to see more alternatives, like more options than what exists today to achieve this, because the current options are certainly limited, especially sort of depending on your level of experience, right? And I think this is a good transition point to Nitro in general. I'm happy we can go into Lars' question sort of on an abstract level, and then I see Zach has another one as well.
Yeah, I don't think I would be the best person to answer those questions, so I'll leave those up to you guys. Do you want to do that now or after Nitro?
Let's try to get through Nitro, and then let's try to touch, because I know you have to go soon.
Yeah.
So let's just try to get
longer
through.
if you want, but I have to go then. Yeah.
Yeah, let's try to do. Yeah, we can stick around and answer some of the questions after the fact. But yeah, let's try to understand like how Nitro and subsequently Nitro Views fits into this. Jacek, I know you already have had like implementation experience with it, so I definitely want to get that take as well. But Marc, what, based off what we're talking about, like why then Nitro? Like where does Nitro fit into that now and in the future?
That's a good question. The main, so to kind of get a little bit of the backstory here, the main motivation for Nitro was that we built a lot of libraries and we felt very limited in what we can do in React Native's default way to build native modules. So, and the reason for that is also one thing I mentioned earlier. It's React Native has just been around for a long time, and they can't just do very like fundamentally breaking changes, which is fair. That's just how it works. But this also means that the default way to build React Native modules has to be somewhat similar to what we've seen a long time ago. And a long time ago, we still had the bridge, and we didn't have synchronous method access between JavaScript and native code. So we were a bit limited in a way of what we can do. So if you have a native, on a native side, you have a class, an object, or whatever, you want to expose it to JavaScript. Previously, it was just not possible. Previously, you just have static methods with primitive types you can pass between. So that's strings, numbers, booleans, those types. And then also you have a limited implementation for callbacks, for example. So if you have a callback, you can only schedule the call on the JS side, which would traditionally go through the bridge. And you only had the option to have 2 callbacks per method, one success and one failure, which also meant you only had the option to have 1 promise. So you could not have a promise and a callback, because those would be 3 callbacks, right? A promise is already 2 callbacks, resolve and reject. And then you couldn't have a third callback per native method. So in Vision Camera, for example, you have start recording. And start recording, you would expect it to return a promise that resolves once the recording has actually started, because this is an operation that takes time on the native side. But also you need a callback that gets called when the recording is finished later on, right? Because it can also be finished. It doesn't mean, or it's not always only finished when you call stop recording, because it can also finish when there's an error, when you run out of storage, when the user closes the app. It's an event, so you need this callback. But it wasn't possible before, because you can only have 2 callbacks. So it was limited. TLDR, it was limited. And what we did is we built a lot of stuff with JSI directly. So we bridged from Objective-C and on Android from Java to C++. And we used the JavaScript interface, JSI, to do those things manually, I guess. So we built promise implementations ourselves. We built like a bunch of stuff ourselves, which was unsafe. It wasn't. Back in the day when React Native MMKV was just released, it had crashes in production from time to time because it wasn't accessed in a thread-safe way. So you just start the app and it just crashes. And then also it wasn't as fast as it could be. It was faster than native modules, but it wasn't as fast as it could be, simply because the API was just a bit too complex. Or not too complex, but it's just more complex than you can do a lot of stuff wrong, like use effect. You can use it very wrong, and so that those were this was the origin story. And then we decided, okay, we need an abstraction on top of GSI, because that's that's one level deeper than native modules. We needed an abstraction on top of GSI that is fundamentally different than native modules. And it also needs to be fast. It needs to be as fast as GSI, or a little bit faster with like an extra function call or something, but not slower than native modules, obviously. So I built that. I built Nitro for React Native Filament, and it's a fundamentally different approach in a way that you have an object-oriented paradigm where you create an object on a native side, which is a Swift class, a Kotlin class, or a C++ class. So just object-oriented programming, just a class on a native side, and you use it just like if it was a JS class. So you can call new on it, you can call methods on it, which, if you call from JavaScript, if you call a method say hi, and it would be implemented in Swift or in Kotlin, you would actually call directly into this method then. You can call methods on it. You have properties, getters and setters. So this object also has state. You can, assign it values, and it keeps those values in memory, which is, it's expected because it's just like a JS object, right? That's what you expect it to do. But it was just, with native modules, you just didn't really have that because it was a static singleton, right? So you have static methods all the way. You don't have instances of the same object. And then types like functions are just, there's no complex callback registry or events or anything. If you pass a function to native, and it is actually a C++ SCD function, or a Swift Lambda, or a Kotlin callback. So it's just the function type, and you can pass 20 or you can pass 100 functions to native, and it's the same thing. Like every function works. It's just there's no limits to that. And then also it has a code generator, just like Turbo Modules has. Where you write your types in TypeScript, and it generates the native interface. You can program on an interface level. You can implement interfaces in two different classes, which act as the same type in JavaScript. That's how inheritance works. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you can say
that is really cool.
Yeah, you can say you have an interface media, and then on the native side you can implement media as photo and media as video, and on JS you use it the same way. It both has width and height. And then also photo you can have direct inheritance as well. So not only protocol conformance to the same type like media, you can also have like inheritance. So it's layers down that inherit from different objects. So a vision camera frame can inherit from image, for example, and both are images. Even if there's an image that's not a frame, there is a frame that is an image. So fundamentally a bit different than how native modules work, which is unfortunately why we can't backport all of those things. Thank you, Dan. And yeah, it's I think it's very cool. It's very, very fast. It's stupid fast, because it also uses a different underlying implementation than Turbo modules do. So Turbo modules also use JSI, but Nitro modules use it a bit differently, because in Nitro modules we actually have objects that have protocols. Prototypes. So you actually inherit from a JS prototype. The function is cached. It's stored in a native state, which is very easy for the JS VM to optimize. This is why Svetan told me I need to do this instead.
You don't want to do the work all over again. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like if it's going to be able to handle it like that. Yeah. That was something actually I picked up from Nate from Tamagui. He's really big on that. Him and Fernando, they're really big on that idea.
Yeah. And so Nitro modules, and also for iOS, it's actually a bit different as well, because it doesn't use Objective-C. And if you can write a Turbo module in Swift, but you would always go through Objective-C first, because it's just implemented in Objective-C, and it uses Objective-C types like NS number. In Nitro modules, we use the Swift C++ interop, which was introduced in Swift 5.9, 5.10. It is still experimental, so it's experimental technology, but it is much faster. So calling a Swift method with Nitro is like a C++ method call. It's direct call. There's no like Objective-C message sent in between. It's no dynamic dispatch. It's static call, which is insanely fast. And also we can use. I mean, it is very complex on the code. So the generated code is very complex, but it works.
Yeah, something I want to do, and Jacek, this will sort of transition into. I'm curious, like what the experience has been like for you. But something I want to do is to make that the experience of serving something like that up straightforward to understand through usage, not through documentation. These, as we've been building Plugin Pro, which is like basically trying to abstract away and make the Expo config plugins approach easier, you kind of try to approach it from like, where's the person experiencing the pain point? Like, what is around them when they're like, oh crap, like I need to create like some sort of bridge to native code or something. And you want to try to like capture that and sort of begin their journey there, make it as straightforward, obviously, as possible to arrive at the end result. And so I would like to help create a simple interface for something like that. But this has been around for a while, like Nitro modules, relatively.
I think 4 months.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
So
but
not that long, but
enough time for people to like mess around with it. And
Jacek a lot of people have played around with it, and Jacek has built Unistyles, I think V3 in Nitro. And we use Nitro a lot internally as well, and it is simple to implement. It's not so a JS developer would probably be a bit surprised if this was his first time touching native code because of the build setup. It's not just a npm install. Well, technically it should be, but there's always stuff people run into, like when there's some cache issues, when they don't understand how Android Studio works, or when they use a very old React Native version, it just fails to build, and you need to understand why that happens. But if you are on, like, for example, a blank React Native template on a version that is supported by Nitro, so anything after React Native 75, it is just an npm install. And one thing that's also really cool, we use Nitro quite a lot, and when you create a Nitro module, like for example, we created a contacts module for Expensify, it's so straightforward that you just describe your types in TypeScript, run Nitrogen, and then all you need to do is write one native file. So it's literally just contacts.swift, you implement your spec, and that's it. There's no extra native files needed. And then the same thing, I'm not sure if you guys have seen it, the same thing also applies to Nitro views. It's just it's one single Swift file or Kotlin for Android, where you implement your view. You don't need any like C++ code, any Objective-C bridging code, any .h bridge, any like nothing, none of that. It's just a simple Swift file. Nitro will generate the binding to autolink it. So it's a strong reference, I guess, to this one name that you define, so contacts in this case, and then the rest is fully auto-generated, and there's no need for anything else, at least unless you want to do some interop with React Native specifically. For example, I know Janik's library, React Native Safe Area Context, and probably also your stuff, Jacek. If you want to interop on the shadow view layer, then you just have to work with React Native APIs and have to write some C++ code. But Nitro is like
possible.
Right. But it's still possible. That's a key point here, and I think that's really cool. Just one single file and you're done.
Yeah, I mean,
and you can also the last thing I want to say about Nitro right now is you can also, like, every Swift or Kotlin object is automatically also a C++ object. So if I write my code in Swift, let's say context module, it's a method called getAllContacts, and it returns a list of contacts. I can also have a second C++ module that's like shared contact parser module, which, I don't know, combines all contacts into a hash or whatever. This you can pass the Swift module or Kotlin module, the platform-specific module, to this C++ module from JavaScript and just use it as if it was a C++ class, because it is. It is a C++ class at its root and only bridges down to Swift or Kotlin optionally. And you can just call in C++ in your shared contacts hasher function module, you can just call the contacts module, the one that actually implements, is written in Swift, and use it as a std vector, for example, for the list of contacts, which I think is amazing. And that's actually something we needed for React Native Filament, where in Filament everything is cross-platform. So you write your GPU rendering code, it's shaders, it's all cross-platform. You have your buffers and everything, but there's one or two implementations which need to be platform specific. Like, for example, loading a file from resources. Like if you want to load a model, a 3D model from resources. On iOS, you would use the data object or whatever, like the bundle API. On Android, you use the resources API. But that's just one function you implement in Swift or Kotlin, and then the rest is in C++. And you can still call those functions as if it was cross-platform, without worrying about where it's actually implemented. So you can mix and match C++ and Swift without writing the code yourself to bridge to Swift or Kotlin.
That's crazy.
It's the same C++ function. And I think that's really, really cool.
And I think, Jacek, you did that for Unicell.
Yeah, that's what I did. And so I guess Nitro is now the new bridge for the native world, but it's not a bridge, it's like the glue. I love it because I can create my specs with Nitrogen, and I didn't touch these files for I don't know, few months. So if you generate your native files from TypeScript interface and so on, it just works. As Marc said, you just need to implement one interface. You just need to inherit from class and so on. And I actually use a lot of instances of hybrid objects. So if you use stylesheet.create, it actually create new instance of hybrid object. I can also add special or special code in JSI if I want to, if something is not representable by the TypeScript type, like your styles, because each user has own style, own keys, and so on. So I can simply jump to JSI word and parse it and move it between languages. So I'm looking forward to Nitro views because maybe I will be able to create some kind of library that can help developers to first render super fast views for native, but also backport it or move it to the third world, which is web.
And I want to jump into that, Jacek, with you actually, and that's going to carry us into the answering Zach Nugent's question. But Marc, I think you have to go, which if you need to, totally feel free to. We were just going to go into like what might inform Nitro view stuff. But you can just watch the recording later. We can chat about it.
Yeah, I'll have to go. I can maybe listen to it on the go, but while I get ready. But I have to go now. It was amazing chatting with you guys, and I hope we can do this again soon. Maybe playing some Call of Duty.
Yeah, I'm with it. Let's do it. All right, man. Thanks for coming by. I'll catch you later.
All right. See you guys.
See you, dude.
Bye.
Yeah. So Jacek, then one thing that Zach surfaced here. So Zach is someone I work on Native Wind UI with, and he is the author of React Native Reusables. So there are these primitives that we work on to power this stuff. And you and I have talked about with Nitro views, just the need for something where like you can have these primitive components. Because if you're going to, purport to do anything cross-platform, you need some sort of baseline primitives to power those components. And with a number of different styling options, whether you're using Unistyles or Native Wind or whatever, the foundational like bits and pieces, the behavior, right, that makes it feel native, that includes the state machines and stuff like that, that needs to exist. And it needs to be performant. It needs to feel native and stuff. And then you need to be able to layer on top of that, then ideally, whatever your personal style preferences are, right? And I think that's really where like Nitro views can be this like powerful potential solution. Obviously, it's still cooking, But with RN primitives, like we started that journey mobile first. Zach actually posted a really good blog post about it. I'll see if I can find it in a second and post it here in the chat. But outlines basically how we started with like serving iOS and Android, and then from there we realized, oh, people really want web, right?
Yeah.
And so being that these are completely different like APIs effectively, how do you empower people from a developer experience perspective to be able to do both without sacrificing the experience across the board, right? How do you not have like a million props? How do you not? And so, like I said, Zach wrote this sort of platform first universal component approach article, which I don't think you've read, but when you think about doing that for your clients with Unistyles, like what, not thinking about any particular solution, like what is the shape of that solution? Like what does it allow you to do? Like what are the core aspects of a solution that allows you to do stuff like that?
Yeah, so first of all, we need to take a look on the current implementation or current possibilities. So as you know, with Metro, we can change file extension. And as simple as that, out of the box, we can create one component for Android, one for iOS, one for web, simply by adding suffix web, Android, iOS. Also, with React Native Web, we have like the high-level API, and we can share all the props together between all the platforms. So we have everything with the current version of React Native that can support this initiative. Yet, we still don't have like the perfect solution. We still need to struggle with the abstraction. So that's why I guess it's now possible, and it would be possible with Nitro views to handle the native views, so we can build or use another abstraction. And if we use another abstraction, we can skip React Native Web. We can skip like the old APIs, the old ways to build cross-platform components, and we can create new way. How to do that? I guess the best way would be to port some kind of small list of props of functions between all the platforms. Actually, it depends on the project. I don't need to have all the properties from div and all the properties from view, because you don't need to use them in your project. Most likely, you need to use style, I don't know what else, on press, and so on. Right now is the time to build such abstraction, and actually I'm looking for a way to bring something new for the React Native ecosystem. So that's why I will leave the native view side to Marc and to his Nitro views, because I have a good experience with building native libraries with the Nitro. It's straightforward. And for the web, web, we have everything out of the box, because everything just works in the browser. You don't need to struggle with the native views. You don't need to struggle with the shadow tree or shadow DOM. It just works. This platform is mature enough to build like another abstraction that can simplify all the cross-platform issues. So I think that platform first universal components, I think is the time to build such components. As I said, clients expect web applications too, at least from us, but I guess it's not the only...
it's a thing. It's just it's really tricky until you have like a way that you are effective, because it's not just about providing a solution that is like the thing and you're like, okay, like we're going to do this now. Providing web and mobile as a solution for even just a client right now is effectively selling like an ideology. Like you become like a champion of dictating, okay, this is how we recommend doing it. And there isn't like a settled way of doing that stuff. So you're going to run up against challenges, not only because there isn't that way to do things understood by everybody, there's a whole bunch of different ways. And also, not a lot of libraries have thought about this yet. Like we're not at the level of maturity where like a lot of this stuff is going to be conscious of web in terms of its solution. That is exactly the type of problem we run into with native Wind UI. It's not that this stuff is inherently difficult. It's that like once you pick a solution, you got to kind of stick with it. You know, you gotta be pretty confident in the general high level approach. What I would love to see, and I think what you and I, Jacek, have talked about, is just like if Unistyles wants a component library, let's call it Unistyles UI or something, we're fundamentally going to be trying to deliver the same set of like functionality, but just with a different interface to the user. And the fact that this kind of stuff doesn't quite exist yet is pretty jarring for how mature React Native is. But it also can't sacrifice performance.
Yeah.
So it's all this stuff. I think I'm currently personally in the camp of these code bases should be separate for the, like if a client comes to me and says, hey, like we want web and mobile, I'm certainly in the camp like these should be separate code bases. Like the web is the web and it works the way it should, and mobile is mobile. And you're going to realize that now, or you're going to realize it later. And I'm interested to see where, say, like Expo goes with router, and what the shape of that future looks like. But, you know, with respect to Lawrence's question, say about like server components in React Native, I don't get this stuff. Like I don't understand what drives people to want to do this stuff. Maybe it's serving like, because I know Expo's clients as an example are all these like bigger companies and stuff like that. I'll just surface Lawrence's question real quick. I don't even know if he's still around, but for a lot of the big companies, I think they end up functioning this way, you know, where they're server rendering stuff, and then like the client app basically becomes a way to consume that all. But I call it, I'm not used to it. I just don't like, if the web is the web and it exists and it functions and it's functioned for a while, give people that. I understand server components is a popular idea there. But as a mobile developer, there's stuff you're thinking about there. There's different like interactions between mobile and web. Like they differ enough that having to think about that layer, it's hard for me to understand how you would be able to like abstract that away meaningfully, and have people not think about it or not have to like learn it. And that would further entrench you into like a framework or a tooling, right? And I'd like that to not be the case. So what Marc was saying about what Nitro aims to do makes a lot of sense to me, because you're not taking people out of there. You still have to know this stuff at the end of the day. Like you still have to understand what's actually going on. So I don't know. I mean, do you guys actually offer your clients like monorepos or like React Native web as a solution?
Yeah, so actually we have a lot of requests about all the platforms. So we need to also support tablets. That's why I built Unistyles, because it's easier to create single style sheet and abstract styles away to simple object and use media queries and so on. Yeah, but you need to also remember that clients expect nowadays, because we have AI, we have a lot of powerful tools. They expect to pay less for more. So they expect to get one team that can build all the platforms with one code base at the same price. It was possible. It was not possible a few years ago because they had to hire 3 teams, one for web, one for mobile, and one for mobile Android and one for mobile iOS. So we're still exploring what's the best way to put a line, where to put a line between, okay, we shouldn't share the view, or maybe we should share the view, but we shouldn't share all the components. Maybe we should share components, but not the view, so we can put a different suffix in Metro and get the different experience. Should we build like separate app for iPad or treat it like web to scale? I don't know. So we have a lot of options, and actually it depends on the client. It depends on the project.
And that's almost like my point, is that it ends up depending so much. Like I would bump into problems with respect to this. This point with clients that I wasn't even aware of all of the places where the line could be drawn. Like I remember one client, and they have both web and mobile app, and they wanted like tests run across both. And I was like, oh shit. Like that doesn't even, like there isn't like a universal testing suite kind of thing. Like we had to write a lot of those helper functions ourselves, and coordinate all these different tools together. And it's like the amount of places that you run into issues with trying to like coordinate all these spaces together. I mean, this is assuming that we were not using React Native Web, right? So this is trying to like meld, I think it was Next.js, I want to say, or maybe just like React with React Native. So that's going to be its own set of challenges. But yeah, it effectively becomes this like attempt to find a line in a bunch of stuff that you're doing and understanding when should this be like this approach versus this should be like, when should it be a platform specific approach or solution versus a universal approach. And I think I want to see more platform specific stuff, but I want to see it handled by the tooling that I'm using. Like I want to be able to just select the platforms I want to serve, and I want to see the code in some ways created for me for it. I struggle personally a lot with the idea of having like a generic whatever that is meant to cover like a number of different platforms. That is a difficult idea or pill for me to swallow, because then you're not replacing, at the end of the day, at least for what I do, and presumably for what you do, Jacek, you're not replacing the need for me to understand how the per platform stuff works. You're actually just adding to the list. Like I'm still going to need to know how that native per platform stuff works. And now on top of that, I'm going to have to understand your generic and how it maps to those things. So wherever possible, I'm default taking the platform first approach and then sprinkling on top of that, where appropriate, like more universal stuff. And I think that's what like is at the heart of what Zach was mentioning earlier with respect to how we're changing RN primitives. But yeah, as far as, go ahead.
I can also add something about server-side rendering the server components. So actually, we had a lot of troubles with Hubert. He's also a contributor to Unistyles. So I'm not sure if you know that, but if you want to use, for example, Next.js server components, you need to get rid of all hooks. So we had to struggle a lot and to remove useRef, useState from the Unistyles 3.0 because it was not possible to render it on the server. So yeah, look, server-side rendering, server components, has some benefits or have some benefits, but for me, it's like the fourth platform. So we need to support Android, iOS, web, and server-side rendered components. As of now, I don't see like a lot of requests about server render components. Maybe it will change in the future. Maybe it's the same story like with Vision OS. It's not yet mature to get a traction and to get a lot of requests about it. But still, I saw Evan Bacon demo about the server components. It looked cool. I think it's a cool piece of technology. I'm not sure if it will be widely used. Of course, it has some usages like for the AI-driven chats. Of course, you can build cool application like he did with the. So he saw this demo with the Apple Maps. It looked cool. But we still should focus on React Native, on the basic stuff like Android, iOS, and web. That's the like 95% of the projects nowadays. Of course, we will have requests about the React Native Windows, React Native macOS, React Native Vision OS, but still, it's just the minority of the requests. That's why we should build the strong core, the strong foundation, which is React Native Core and libraries.
I think to that point, right? Like, as I spend more time building developer tools, something that has become ingrained, like just carved into my mind, is that the thing that people value more than anything, I find, is consistency. So the trick that companies like Expo run into, I mean, this is not Expo. I mean, Vercel runs into this issue and has recently run into this problem, is that when you change things up too much, you may be well-intentioned in doing so, but the experience that you create or the experience that you affect by way of those changes, it causes the user to have to think about something that isn't part of their MO, not what they're trying to do. And especially when you start to offer, because companies will do that thing where they introduce some new technology, and as a way to try to promote it, right, they'll have all their documentation, all of their examples begin to sort of skew into one direction. And they'll say, well, we're not pushing this on you, this approach, but they kind of are, right? Because they're having all of this stuff lean you in that direction, but you have this other thing. And so after a while, it just becomes such a taxing experience, and that shapes your perception of what that experience is. And so once you become established and once people start to like really vibe with what you're doing, say in Expo's case, major changes to how you interface with that, even if meant in service of what you're doing, can have a detrimental effect on the reputation of your ecosystem. And so all to say, patterns are really, really important. I put a lot of emphasis on establishing your patterns up front and trying to minimize breaking changes whenever possible. I hate doing breaking changes personally. I don't look forward to major version releases. I think like I'd rather have as few major version releases as possible, because I want that consistent experience. I want to know that like every hour that you've put into using something that I have built or worked on is going to serve you moving forward, right? Because now you have this understanding. Now you know how like in the future you can rely that these things are going to be there, right? So, yeah. I mean, Unistyles is such a great example of this. Like you're your attempt to sort of stay within the consistency of what the style sheet experience overall is it just falls directly in line with that, right? People don't have to deviate their model of thinking too much to adapt to that set of tooling. And I think with every step that you have taken thus far, your major version releases are actually aligned with enforcing the patterns, bringing it closer to what people are already used to. You're not moving away from that, from what I understand. You're doing more stuff under the hood, right? You're like swapping out. It's like changing the engine in a car. You're making huge changes under the hood, but that is not necessarily perceivable outside of just performance boosts and things like this to the external viewer in terms of how they interface with your tool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, the first version of Unistyles was written like in JavaScript in 100%. Then it came like we released Unistyles 2.0. It was a couple times bigger when it comes to the code base, and it also touched a few languages, few native things. And then we released Unistyles 3.0, which is a couple times bigger than Unistyles 2.0. But we are still trying to focus on Stylesheet API. So like you said, we don't want to move away from it, as we can get rid of React Native Stylesheet. It's like the base way of building or creating styles in React Native. So that's why we are trying to align the API as close to as Stylesheet API. Yet on the backend side or on the backend of the Unistyles, we had to create a lot of abstraction, a lot of code to handle all the things that you don't need to know. You don't want to look there. You don't want to implement listeners for the native events, like changing device orientation or dark mode. Of course, you can use like community packages, and you can use hooks. But still, you can get a lot out of the box with the one code base. You can target multiple platforms. That's also the job of Native Wind. That's also like the people or developer expectation to get one styling library for all platforms. So I guess we are in the place done that we need to support all the platforms, no matter what, at least the free platforms and that are most popular. Unistyles 2 supported also React Native Windows, React Native macOS, React Native Vision OS, but I thought it true, and I don't think it's necessary, as these platforms steal my time. For example, to implement something in React Native Windows, I would need to re-implement everything, like the whole new code. I cannot share the code.
And this is exactly something I wanted to touch on. Like, we are not Facebook. We are not these massive companies. We're not Google. Like, you and I don't know how large the team is, but Native Wind UI is at most 4 people, right? Along with the React Native reusables and ARM primitives. And of course, there's the open source contributions to be mindful of, and, very thankful for that stuff where relevant. But on the whole, when working on a library like Unistyles or Native Wind or something like that, I mean, even Native Wind is just 2 people basically, right? In the open source community. You have to figure out a way, like inevitably into your project, it derives from the fact that it is just a couple people working on it, and you have to come up with solutions that don't require you to rewrite everything for a whole new platform, because it's just not viable. It doesn't matter if that's the right way to do it or like whatever. Like, part of this whole gig is figuring out how to support this stuff in a way that you can allow people to just sort of bridge into a whole set of functionality without your help. And that is the strength of mapping to things and stuff. It not only allows them to do that, it keeps it up to date, like, because then maybe you just have to account for like adding additional mappings or changing some names on something, but like you're just not going to be able to support everything. You're never going to be able to catch up with all the different platforms and all the different stuff. So you need to find a not a user compromise, but almost like a developer tooling creator compromise of how you're going to maintain all that stuff. And that is also what I find, like when I think about like how to prioritize the stuff we need to do for Native Wind UI or Native Wind, I'm not thinking about what we need, right? I'm thinking about from the user's perspective. Because a lot of the way this works is one developer tries the thing, then they go to their company, right? And they try to sell that idea into the company, right? How do I arm that person to have as little pushback as possible? That's how I think about it. And that then informs how like Native Wind UI is shaped and how Native Wind is shaped. They ask about things like, is this maintained? And you're not going to be able to keep pace if you keep adding to that list of shit that you need to maintain. And if you want to make the case, or you want someone on your behalf to make the case for using your tool, for advocating for it, don't make it harder on yourself and on them to do so, So, and that's where I, again, defer back to like platform specific stuff. It just is more straightforward because it's less of this mapping bullshit. It's less of this like trying to make one thing work for everything, I just saw Dan's comment pertaining to, well, he mentioned while Marc was here, of taking an approach where you have separate native apps. And I think he's saying this because we do this sort of for a client of ours, but having, or sort of a approach of this, separate native apps for each target platform. And then there's like a common library between them that handles like the business logic, and the state kind of stuff. I like it. I mean, there's a lot of, I'm curious how you think about this and whether this would be meaningful for what y'all do, but this would solve that problem, right? Because the business logic is something that's shared, right? For if you imagine yourself as a React developer coming in to React Native, right? Visually, it looks the same. Your expectations are now set. I expect to be able to use the patterns that I know in React Native. Reality is not going to be kind to you in this situation, because pretty much the only place where that overlap exists, where your patterns that you're used to would work, they begin and end at state management, business logic, right? Maybe networking, but everything else is different. Absolutely everything else is different. So I'm curious, like, if there was a framework that came out in the next like year or two that took this approach that Dan is talking about, is that even something that makes sense for you guys at CodeMask?
I think it does, but we should still share some code. Actually, I had to write like HTTP client for widget in Swift and for Android.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be like a special implementation to accept server certificate, so it's not like it wouldn't work out of the box. So as you can see, to achieve one thing, I had to write code in Kotlin and in Swift. So I don't think I would like this idea to create everything separately for each platform. I would love to see some kind of framework based on React, because as Mark said, I also love React. I also love building views with JSX. It's straightforward. It's like it's a standard.
That kind of composable
So
model.
yeah, actually, it's not like a secret that Swift UI and Jetpack Compose inspired are inspired by React syntax. So actually, we are not that far from building like universal framework for all platforms, and we can still target web because we can simply render React. And the only way to because I don't know what Dan mentioned about moving or keeping the native code separately, and to have some kind of layer of common code. But if we add to it web, we have a problem, because the only language that can be shared across all platforms is C++. Would you keep your logic in C++, your business logic?
No. I mean, I think when suggesting this concept, I think trying to do anything in the way of like shared C++, I would rely on the framework to handle these things. But I am increasingly becoming the idea of ending up with platform-specific code, even if it is the Swift UI, the Kotlin stuff at the end, is appealing, increasingly so to me, whether I am the one writing it or not. For me, if the framework can handle that, but allow me, like you said, to have, this interface of writing it with JavaScript, that is pretty appealing. Like that's a very strong case. And I think that my understanding is that is very much what Nitro Views is meant to do.
If we can stay on JS side or on TypeScript side and quickly jump into native world, because I don't know, we need to create cool Swift UI animation with few modifiers instead of using reanimated to recreate.
It shouldn't be this
frame.
whole whole thing. Like you should have the thought and then just be able to like go do the thing. Like it shouldn't be a whole like I need to figure out how to bridge that gap or.
Yeah, of course you can recreate it with reanimated. It could be actually straightforward, but still you can jump into Swift UI, you can jump into Jetpack Compose and add just 3 or 4 lines, and that's all. Why would you spend a lot of time recreating it in JavaScript? It's like faking animation, faking native animation. It's actually what I think about Flutter. They fake native components. They do it pretty good. But if we can, for example, build as easy as possible shared element transition in Swift UI and in Jetpack Compose, we shouldn't stay in JavaScript and figure it out how to pass like the view handle across navigation, which is also like abstraction on top of native navigations. So I agree, if we could get like a framework to stay in JavaScript, stay in React, stay in JSX, and easily jump between languages if we need to. Because if we don't need to, we can stick to like the plain JSX components and get basic or standard behavior from the native. It will be a game changer.
Yeah, I think that if there would be a breaking change, and all of what we're saying, I feel like, just to put a footnote or asterisk near it, none of this matters if you're building the Walmart app. None of this matters if you're building like a banking app. None of this matters if you're building like a medical payments application, where like what it looks like, what its performance is like, doesn't matter. For that, literally go create WordPress for mobile apps, and you're going to be fine with that too. None of them care. They're going to pay the whatever millions of dollars a year for whatever hosting solution just like churns out the garbage that they create. But for the people who are actually trying to create something meaningful, the people who are trying to create memorable experiences and things that like people want to talk about, this is what like the stuff we're talking about applies to that. And so I ultimately see over the next year, even maybe 2 at most, we're going to start to see some frameworks popping up. We're going to start to see some stuff from companies that is going to challenge how things have been for a while. And what I'm hoping for further is not just to see the same ground retread as we have seen over the last several years, and not to build something that only accounts for what has come before. I'm hoping to see thoughtful decisions and patterns implemented reflective of the stuff we're talking about, the stuff that's coming up, right? And accounting for who's coming in looking for solutions, and where the bar is for building experiences and where it's going to be, because it keeps going up. Like the expectation of what is good, at least again from a client perspective and even from our products perspective, that's it feels like it's always going up, if ever just so slightly. And I'm excited because it means that all of these people are going to get a swift kick in the ass, and it's no longer going to be this discussion of like, oh well, you know, everyone will come around, or you know, eventually everyone will be on it. It's like, no, there's no eventually. You're either going to get it right now, or someone else is going to beat you to like figuring it out. Yeah, I see this all happening roughly over the next 2 years. I don't think React Native is going anywhere, like you said. People love React. People.
Yeah, I love React and the React Native Web, even though I don't like few parts. You know, without it, we couldn't build few applications. Yeah, it's open source, so we are grateful for that. Still, we can see some improvements, some opportunities to build something cooler, better, modern.
Yeah. So I'm excited for all of that. I'm excited to see the approaches that people take to all this, like mobile, web, all this stuff. It's going to be, we're not out of the woods of like the big changes and like the evolving ecosystem, and that feels pretty exciting. I think that's probably a good place to call it. We kind of jumped up in viewership to like 873 this time around, so that's pretty good. But yeah, we'll be doing the next one with Marc, and as long as Jacek, you install Call of Duty, we'll probably just be like shit and like playing Call of Duty. And I'll see if I can get Mike Grabowski on the stream as well. But yeah, as I always love talking about this stuff, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for joining, everybody. Jacek, if you have anything you want to add, feel free.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for discussing. I think we will have a bright future, and like you said, we just need to give some people a little bit more time to figure things out. Yeah, but we are in a good place to start building super cool stuff. It's not that hard anymore, like a few years ago.
Yeah, that's definitely easier than then. But now there are more options. So
yeah,
to a bright future. Yep. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.